You know, when they completed the original Transcontinental Railroad, there were 4 ceremonial spikes. Since then, there have been, well, hundreds of very tiny spikes to commemorate the event as souvenirs. But today, we're talking about a huge gold spike, 43.3 feet tall. It's going to be a beautiful memorial to those that worked on the original Transcontinental Railroad. This is Trains Live. Come on along and find out. So over 150 years ago, the original Transcontinental Railroad was completed with the driving of the gold spike at Promontory, Utah. Every school student in America studies that. But when you look behind the story and you look at all the monuments that are scattered across the West talking about the building of the original Transcontinental Railroad, well, they talk about just that, the building, the physical railroad. Maybe they look at some of the famous people in management. They look at the scandals that surrounded the railroad. But how about the people that actually built the railroad? The folks that were out there laying the track, that were building the bridges, that were boring the tunnels, the ones that broke their backs, and some of them gave their lives to complete this first Transcontinental Railroad. A lot of those folks fall into a category very aptly named of forgotten faces of the Transcontinental Railroad. Well, since the Gold Spike 150th anniversary in 2019, there is a group in Utah, the Golden Spike Foundation, who has been working to help with education on the original Transcontinental Railroad and also to memorialize those forgotten faces. And that's what we're talking about this morning on Trains Live. There is a new Gold Spike Memorial that is about to be placed in Utah. We are going to be talking with Doug Foxley from the Golden Spike Foundation and Dow Bloomberg, who is the artist that has created this new memorial. So, Doug, Dow, welcome to Trains Live. Pleasure to have you along this morning. And Doug, let me start off with you. Tell me a little bit about the Golden Spike Foundation. Yes, it was there to help plan the festivities around the 2019 150th anniversary, but this organization is a lot more. It is education. It is there to memorialize, as I said, some of these forgotten faces.
Well, thanks, Bob, or Roberto, or whatever you want to call us today. Tickled to be with you. Great introduction here. 2019, had a crazy idea. Actually, 2017, kind of thought we ought to have a big bang to talk about the 150th celebration. Talked to the governor, the legislature into forming a commission. Had over 150 commissioners, and we raised almost $8 million in kind or in cash. Wow. Oh, did we ever? We partied like it was 1869. But, parties come and go. And part of what we wanted to do is really through art to tell a story. And, we don't have a lottery here in Utah. A legal lottery. I mean, who knows what at the parishes with bingo. But anyway, we decided that we really wanted to do something artistically. And so working with the state of Utah, we actually put out an RFP to artists. And we had over 400 submittals from artists from 37 countries, several foreign countries. And guess what? We were so darn lucky because Mr. Dow Bloomberg, that handsome face there, that handsome bearded face you're seeing on the screen, he submitted a proposal. And it was to really, as you said, Bob, it was to basically recognize the nameless, the faceless, really the forgotten heroes of the first Transcontinental Railroad. And it's quite a story. We won't get into that today. That's not what we're about. Initially, we were going to do a 22-foot statue. It was going to be a spike. It was going to be 22 feet tall. And then all of a sudden, crazy things happen. Imagine that. But we decided that we were going to go big or go home. And we decided that instead of putting this statue out of Promontory Summit at Golden Spike National Historical Park. By the way, thank you, Congress, for passing that in 2019 and making that. But anyway, so we decided that we'd try to put a statue on I-15, Interstate 15. That's the interstate that runs between Mexico and Canada. And we wanted to try to get people out to Golden Spike. In addition to this, we bought 8 acres of ground on the old Reeder Ranch off I-15, right across from the Bear River Bay Bird Refuge Visitor Center. And part of the cool thing about the 8 acres that we, along with Brigham City, Utah, bought is that the original Transcontinental Railroad bed runs through this site. So anyway, we're in the process of creating a Golden Spike Park.
Doug, there's one thing that I want you to address for folks. You know, like I said in the opening, every school kid in America studies the Transcontinental Railroad, and I've been involved in some of that educational process from the museum perspective. You know, I've done work in classrooms, and to me, it is a subject that so many times gets glossed over. A lot of the history textbooks that are being used when it comes to railroads and the Transcontinental Railroad, you know, if you've got a U.S. history book that is maybe 400 pages long for students to use, there might be 4 or 8 pages devoted to railroads or the Transcontinental Railroad. Yet there is such a rich story here, and it is a story that goes beyond just, hey, a bunch of guys went out and built a railroad. There is this national significance to what was done. How important for you, for the foundation, is it to keep this message alive? And why should we still be paying attention to the Transcontinental Railroad instead of, okay, we had a 150th anniversary, let's wait till the 175th or 200th and have another party? No. Why should we be paying attention to this thing every day or learning about it in our schools?
Well, great question. And by the way, if you're doing the Jeopardy question, the Golden Spike route wasn't really driven at Promontory Point. It was driven 34 miles north of there at Promontory Summit. Yeah. But really, I think, and hopefully when you're talking about books today, Bob, you'll refer to Steve Ambrose's book, Nothing Like It in the World. But Steve Ambrose, one of my favorite historians, he refers to what happened here as really the equivalent of the moonshot. Think about it, okay? Mm-hmm. George Washington traveled at the same speed as Julius Caesar. All of a sudden, Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of the Civil War, early on, things are not going well. He gets Congress on July 1st, 1862, to pass the Pacific Railroad Act. The Civil War ends 1865. 4 years later, this thing happens. But what happened is all of a sudden, you could now go from New York City to Sacramento in 7 days. I mean, it was unheard of. Prior to that time, you'd either have to go around the Cape, you'd either have to cross Panama, cross the Isthmus of Panama, because the Panama Canal had not been built, or you'd have to, go up the Mississippi and go really across some pretty desolate desert trails to get to California. So it was a significant event, and it was so significant that really what happened is when the event occurred, it was the first time that you had an event that was, simultaneously transmitted literally not throughout the country, but throughout the world, because they were stringing telegraph wires, and they basically attached a wire to one of the spikes, and they tapped on the telegraph, the modern equivalent of Twitter or whatever you want to call it, X or whatever you want to call it today. And all of a sudden, the world knew this was happening. They fired cannons over San Francisco Harbor, New York Harbor. They rang the Liberty Bell. Church bells rang throughout the land. Why? Because we were transforming and finally making it so that you could get across the country from San Francisco to New York and not only move people, but move freight. It really opened up the West. It totally transformed the world. And that's why we think the story is still important today. Something
we absolutely need to remember. I mean, when you put it in that perspective, yeah, it is it is as relevant today as the advancements of the internet or any other technology. So, for the last 28 months, Dow Bloomberg has been working away in his studios in Kentucky to craft this new piece of public art, this 43.3 foot tall new gold spike. And Dow, I've been reading some of the statistics about this. There are 74 different people, faces represented on the spike. There are folks from all the different groups that were involved in building the Transcontinental Railroad, the Chinese, the Irish, the African Americans, folks from the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, other nationalities. This for you must have been one of those once-in-a-lifetime, all-encompassing projects that I can't imagine. This thing had to have been a ton of fun to produce, yes?
You hit the, pardon me, but you hit the nail on the head. See what I did there? This piece has been far and away the largest and most engrossing piece that I have done in my 20-30-year career. And it has been, it's a journey. You know, you create this piece from a sketch on a napkin in a steakhouse in Utah. And then I'm looking out my window and I see a 43-foot tall golden spike ready to be picked up by a crane tomorrow. You know, the journey is amazing and just a huge honor, and just a huge honor.
Okay, couple of little background things. The spike is 43.3 feet tall, and you don't know how many people at trains here have, when they found out I was interviewing you guys and talking about this, came to me and said, Bob, 43.3 feet. I mean, what the heck, okay? And then, I read some of the media material, and yes, it's the square root of 1869. Who thought of that size for this? I mean, and Doug, if it was you, raise your hand, please. I mean, Dow, who came up with, Doug, this was your idea? Okay.
I just started playing around with numbers one day, and anyway, I'm kind of wonder what the square root of 1869 is, and then it ended up being 34.341 feet tall, and you know what? God bless Dow. He went along with it. But so anyway, we wanted to have the largest piece of public art on the NAFTA highway, and boy, did Dow ever deliver.
There we go. Now, I love that. First off, being mathematically challenged myself. Okay, I can't do the square root of anything without my calculator in my hand. But to me, it's also one of those little hidden mysteries that kind of goes along with unraveling the entire Transcontinental Railroad story. And Dow, that's something that I wanted to ask you about. This was a journey, and obviously there was the journey to get to the point of creating the sculpture, and then there was creating the sculpture, and now, like you said, we're going to load it on a truck and tour it out to Utah. We're going to go on another journey. There must have been for you kind of an unfolding of layers, almost like on an onion, as this story came about. And I know for me, every time I read another book on the Transcontinental Railroad, there's another little detail, another little rabbit hole to chase down. What was that like for you in creating this and arriving at the people who were going to appear on this sculpture?
It's very, very perceptive, Bob, because that's exactly how I feel. Like you, I had been exposed to some Transcontinental Railroad history at school. I had read Steve Ambrose's book years ago, totally before this, just because I'm a history nut. But when I started meeting the people, when I went to Utah and I started seeing the passion, and we went and toured the grade that still exists, and we saw some excavations of Chinese workers' homes and shards of pottery. when I met with Irish people whose family had come out there as workers and stayed, I started to feel the reality. And I think when we're trying to bring history to life, where I want people, especially young people, to remember that this was real, that these were real people
Sure.
with the same passions, loves, anxieties, irritations that we feel. They weren't grainy black and white people. They were as full-blooded and fleshed out as we are. And that's the magic of trying to communicate history in a live, in a living, breathing way. And I think that's the goal. And so when I started studying the faces, because I wanted to portray faces as they looked, not as they'd be cast in a Hollywood movie in 2020s, but
Sure.
how did they look? They ate differently. Their ancestry was much closer to Europe or Africa or China than we are now. I wanted them to look correct because I wanted all of that to come through. And then I've done a lot. I've been blessed to do a lot of military memorials and some veterans memorials, and have worked with a lot of veterans, and just obviously the issue of, for example, of PTSD has come up a lot. Well, in my research, I started to realize when the Civil War ended, that had torn this nation apart, taking the lives of over 400,000 Americans, blue and gray, just like veterans of today, a lot of them were not able to go back to the farm and just segue back into life. So
Sure.
here's this adventure out west where you can make some decent money and you can see the West, and all this flood of veterans, fell upon the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific, mostly Union Pacific, and plugged in there. And I started realizing there is great continuity between what happened then and what we're experiencing today.
That, and right there, I think you have hit on a most amazing point, is that when we can draw lines from, today, now, contemporary time, relate them to history, and someone looking at this down the road, like you say, maybe a veteran looks and goes, wow, those guys probably were experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, but they didn't know it. They didn't know what it was. And, maybe working on the Transcontinental Railroad got them back on their feet. Maybe just being in the beautiful West helped, whatever. But, here it is. It's something that was happening 150 years ago that today we've got a term for and we recognize, but back then they didn't. And for you to bring that forward in this, pretty neat. What was the most moving story that you discovered in the process here?
Wow, there are so many. I can't answer that. I can't nail one down. I think my revelation of what we just talked about with the veteran experience, I had not read about that. I had not read about the numbers of veterans and then linked that experience with what we're seeing today. And so that was very moving to me. I think also having talks with Chief Darren Perry from tribes out in Utah who work closely with me and during my research regarding impact on Native American culture and lifestyles. And I think that was an area that my knowledge was not as fleshed out as. And so trying to put myself in the shoes of the peoples who were living there, and then this project comes across their lands, their lands that they had roamed and hunted for hundreds and hundreds and thousands, sometimes thousands of years, and trying to then come up with ways to portray that. Again, so somebody today, a 10-year-old and their grandparent standing there can both take something from that image today, but also 20 years from now. Trying very hard to create something that's timeless, that will speak to people in future generations, that is not relevant just to maybe what's being discussed on the internet, October 3rd, 2023, because it's bigger than that. It stretches back, it stretches forward.
Beautiful. We are talking with Doug Foxley of the Golden Spike Foundation, Dow Bloomberg, who was the sculptor, the award-winning sculptor, who has created what will become the new or the next Gold Spike Memorial to be placed along I-15 in Utah. As Dow mentioned, tomorrow a big crane is picking up this 43.3 foot long or tall sculpture, depending on which way it's oriented, placing it on a truck. It's headed out on a whistle-stop tour, headed toward Utah, stops in St. Louis, Kansas City, Council Bluffs, Iowa, North Platte, Nebraska, the Colorado Railroad Museum outside of Denver and Golden, Colorado. It'll make it up to Cheyenne, Wyoming, to the depot there, into Rock Springs, Wyoming, and eventually to the Utah State Capitol, where there will be a VIP event receiving the sculpture. Dow, when this driving of the Gold Spike, as Doug told us we should refer to this as, when this starts happening tomorrow, studio's going to feel a little empty. How are you going to feel as this work goes off down the road?
That's funny, Bob. I feel like you're crawling into my head because just yesterday, after the studio looked like a whirlwind went through it, and we have people coming tomorrow. So last 2 days we've been madly cleaning up. But after everybody left, I just sat in the studio, this big empty studio, and I looked around, and there's little shimmering pieces of gold leaf still on the floor, that blew around. There's pieces. It's like the day after the New Year's Eve party,
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
And there is that. I'm launching this baby out into the world, which is what it was created for.
Yeah.
This big empty studio, because literally my studio's 50 feet long.
Oh, geez.
This piece.
Okay.
With the
This was a door-to-door piece.
It essentially cut my studio completely in half. If I wanted to go from one side to the other to drill a hole, I had to walk all the way around it. So we're really glad it's not there, but we're really sad. I'm really sad to be moving on.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So, all right. We are going to step over to Mr. Bob's Railroad bookshelf for just a minute here. Couple of books on the bookshelf, and Doug, I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you. I didn't bring along Stephen Ambrose's book, which is a great accounting of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. I did bring along one book about the Transcontinental Railroad that I very much like, Empire Express, by David Hayward Bain. This book, folks, it is still available. Go out and get yourself a copy. Now, look. It's a big, fat book, all right? But it is so worth the read. One of the reasons I really like Bain's accounting here, Bain addresses the people. And he does talk about the Chinese workers and how they were treated. He talks about the Civil War soldiers coming west to try to find their way back in the world. So Empire Express, David Hayward Bain, see if you can find that one. Great book. The other book that I pulled off the shelf this morning, and we're talking about giving face to the faceless. Ghosts of Gold Mountain. And as we probably all know, the Central Pacific had a wealth of Chinese workers that came over to build the railroad. The treatment they received was incredibly poor, and I think that's probably an understatement, which, why in this memorial it is so gratifying to see Chinese workers recognized. But Ghosts of Gold Mountain tells their story. And you know what? If you're looking at the Transcontinental Railroad, you have to look at this as well. If not, you are not getting a complete picture. Ghosts of Gold Mountain, Gordon Chang. It is a current book. You can still pick this one up out there. Now, you're probably going right now, Bob, listen, I've read books on the Transcontinental Railroad. I've read Ambrose, I've read Ames, I've read, so on and so forth. There are many, many books out there, but don't read just one, folks. Read a couple, okay? Don't make this your life's work here of reading one after another, but read one, take a break, read another one. Why? Because in every book, the author picks up different aspects of the story. And after you read 6, 10, 12 books, okay, yeah, I'm a little bit Transcontinental Railroad nutty, I've read that many, you get new discoveries each time. You get a fuller picture of what is being said. And then look, then your homework, after you read these, you drive your own Gold Spike and you head out to Utah. You see Dow's new memorial. Visit the website for the Golden Spike Foundation. Go out to Promontory. Run along, ride along, walk along the old roadbeds that are out there. It kind of completes your picture. So, a couple of books on the bookshelf. Empire Express, David Hayward Bain, Ghosts of Gold Mountain, Gordon Chang. There's your homework assignment, folks. Doug, Dow, anytime you get to talk about the Transcontinental Railroad is fun. Talking with you gentlemen this morning, the organization, Doug, is so cool what you guys are doing. Dow, congratulations. This is, I hate to say a monumental work, but it is. It is a beautiful piece of sculpture you have created. Trust me, it gives me an excuse to get out to Utah now. So,
hey, Bob, you've done a great job today, and your preparation was amazing. And just have to say, Professor Gordon Chang, provost at Stanford University, foremost expert on Chinese railroad workers, and he was kind enough to work with us and Dow and others to get this thing
Beautiful.
right. So, great job, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Really appreciate being invited.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hope everything goes safely with the tour to get things out there. And yes, there we go.
Please.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
We're going to have one hell of a party at the state capitol. So, come out,
There we go.
October 23rd. We're going to bring this puppy down with Utah Highway Patrol escorts. And, we're going to have a bigger party than we almost had in 2019. So come on out.
Fantastic. All right. Hey, listen, folks, KalmbachHobbyStore.com. Dial into that place for all your books, your hobby needs, puzzles, videos. You know what? In the Kalmbach Hobby Store library, we have got a couple of great videos. Of course, on Promontory in the Transcontinental Road. KalmbachHobbyStore.com. Pick those up right there, folks. Trains.com. Make sure you become an unlimited member. Plenty of new content going up there every day. Dial into Newswire for the latest news from the railroad world. And as always, folks, listen, I want to see you behind the cover of Trains magazine, enjoying our content there. Hey, this is Trains Live. Thanks for coming along.